Security? That black woman has stolen someone's jewelry!
The ballroom fell silent.
How did you sneak into a place like this?
Imani whispered.
I was invited. That necklace is worth more than your life. Take it off before I call the police. This is mine.
This necklace is mine. It's all I have from my mother.
Your mother?
She scoffed.
She stole it too.
Laughter erupted. On the other side of the ballroom, a billionaire's face turned pale. His glass shattered on the marble floor. He wasn't looking at the girl. He was staring at the necklace, the one he'd made for his late wife 22 years ago. When she opened the pendant and he saw the photo inside, he burst into tears. But why? Who was this girl? What secret had been buried for 22 years? 48 hours before the gala, Imani Okafor Wells was on her knees, not praying, scrubbing. The hospital laundry facility started at 4 in the morning. The bags of soiled linens weighed more than she did. She hauled them one by one, her arms shaking, her stomach empty. She was 19, 3 jobs. Hospital laundry at dawn, a nail salon in the afternoon, tips averaging $9 a day. Weekend nights mopping office floors downtown. Rooms where people earned in 1 hour what she earned in a month. She lived in a basement in Englewood, on Chicago's South Side. Not an apartment, a basement. The ceiling leaked brown water when it rained. Black mold behind the bed. The radiator broke 2 winters ago. She slept in her coat from November through March. No kitchen, a hot plate on a plastic crate. $47 in a savings account. Last month, she fainted at the hospital. Low blood sugar. The free clinic nurse used a word Imani never expected to hear at 19. Malnourished. In one of the richest cities in America. This is one of those real-life stories that doesn't feel real, but it was. Imani had no parents, no birth certificate, no birthday. The system gave her a case number, DCF-IL-04-7738, and 7 foster homes by 12. In the second home, she ate alone, a small table in the laundry room. The family ate together in the dining room. No one set a place for her. No one asked about her day. In the fourth home, the foster mother took the welfare checks meant for Imani's care, spent them on her own children. Imani wore shoes 2 sizes too small for a full school year. She learned to walk without limping, not that anyone noticed. In the sixth home, she was the only black child in a white household. No one was cruel. No one was kind either. She existed in the margins, never welcomed, never asked to stay, never told why she had to leave. One morning the caseworker arrived, packed her bag, drove her to the next home. The foster mother didn't come to the door to say goodbye. Imani learned to keep her belongings in one bag, always packed. She learned not to hang pictures on the wall, not to memorize the other children's names, because memorizing meant missing, and missing was a luxury she couldn't afford. Then came Odera Okafor, Nigerian immigrant, retired school janitor, 71 with bad knees and a voice like warm tea. She was the first person who asked Imani what she wanted to eat, not what was left, what she wanted. Imani was 15. She didn't know how to answer. Odera gave her a surname, a bed with clean sheets, a place at the table, not a separate table, the table. For 2 years, Imani had a home. Then Odera got sick. Pancreatic cancer, gone in 4 months. She left behind a shoebox of paperwork, $300 in a coffee tin, and the necklace. The necklace was the only thing connecting Imani to whoever she was before, pinned inside her blanket the night she was brought to her first foster home. A gold chain, a sapphire crescent moon cradling a tiny diamond star. A pawnbroker once offered $800 for it. She was 3 days from eviction. She walked out. Because the necklace had a secret. A tiny clasp on the back, almost invisible. It opened like a locket. Inside, behind thin glass, was a Polaroid, trimmed barely larger than a thumbnail. A woman with auburn hair, smiling, crying, holding a newborn with dark skin against her chest, hospital band still on her wrist, eyes looking straight into the camera, like a goodbye. On the inner casing, engraved in tiny script, "My moon and star, always, C.W." Two initials, a stranger's love letter to a baby who was never claimed. Imani traced those letters every night. Among all the touching stories she'd heard in foster care, children reunited, families restored, none had ever been hers. Until now, she believed none ever would be. But this is also the story of a man who lost everything. Tobias Wren, 71, net worth $4.2 billion, 3 philanthropic boards, a reputation for cold precision in business and absolute silence in personal matters. 22 years ago, his wife Colette died in a car accident. Rain-soaked highway, a guardrail. Tobias survived. Colette did not. What the world never knew, Colette was 8 months pregnant. Their baby, the child they'd tried 7 years to conceive. Tobias told no one, sealed the medical records, buried the pregnancy with her. The grief was too enormous to share. Before the crash, he'd given Colette a necklace, sapphire crescent moon, diamond star, a hidden locket inside, designed to hold their baby's first photograph. Colette wore it every day. She called it our moon and star. After the crash, the necklace was never found. Not in the car, not on her body, not in the river. Tobias hired divers. Nothing. For 22 years, every evening, he poured 2 glasses of wine. One for himself, one for Colette. He never remarried, never removed her photo from his desk. He believed his wife and child were gone forever. But 48 hours from now, a girl in a second-hand dress would walk into a ballroom, and around her neck, the necklace that should have been buried with his wife. What Tobias didn't know yet, what no one knew, was that the necklace held more than sapphire and gold. It held a Polaroid, a final message from a dying mother, and a secret someone had spent 22 years making sure the world would never find. The champagne was still dripping off the marble when Tobias Wren started walking. Not toward the bar, not toward the exit, toward her. His personal security, Dominic Avery, stepped forward. Tobias didn't see him. He didn't see anyone. The entire ballroom, 300 guests, a string quartet, $250,000 in jewelry, had become background noise. All he could see was the pendant. Imani noticed him coming. A tall, silver-haired white man in a suit that cost more than her rent for a year, walking straight at her. She tensed. She'd learned to read rooms. This room did not want her here. He stopped 3 feet away. His eyes were locked on her necklace. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Where did you get that?" Imani's hand went to the pendant. Instinct. She'd been asked this question before. By pawnbrokers, by a foster mother who tried to take it, by a school counselor who assumed it was stolen. The answer was always the same. "It's mine." "I'm not accusing you of anything." His voice cracked. "I need to know, please, where did that necklace come from?" Before she could answer, a familiar voice cut through the air. Genevieve Ashford, back with a hotel security guard, pointing at Imani like she was tagging evidence. "That girl shouldn't be here. Someone should check if that jewelry is stolen." Tobias didn't look at Genevieve, didn't turn his head. He spoke to the guard with a voice that had closed billion-dollar deals and ended boardroom careers. "This young woman is my personal guest. If anyone approaches her again, they'll hear from my legal team. Now, leave us." The room shifted. Genevieve's smile vanished. The guard stepped back. 300 guests suddenly found their champagne very interesting. Imani stared at Tobias. No one had ever done that for her. Not once. Not in 19 years. Then he asked something no one had ever asked. "The pendant. Does it open?" Imani froze. No one knew it opened. she had never shown anyone. The tiny clasp on the back was almost invisible. She'd discovered it by accident at 13, picking at the edge with a fingernail during a night she couldn't sleep. She looked at this man, his trembling hands, his glassy eyes, something in his face. She couldn't name it. Not pity, not curiosity, something deeper. She unclasped the locket and held it open toward him. Tobias looked down, and the world stopped. Inside the locket, a Polaroid, trimmed to the size of a thumbnail, faded, curled at the edges, but unmistakable. It was Colette, his Colette, holding a newborn baby with dark skin against her chest, a hospital band on her wrist. She was smiling. She was crying. She was looking into the camera the way someone looks when they know they're running out of time. This photo was taken after the crash, after the delivery. Colette had survived, at least for a few hours, long enough to hold her baby, long enough to ask a nurse to take a Polaroid, long enough to trim the photo, tuck it into the locket, and pin the necklace to her baby's blanket. Her final act as a mother. Tobias's knees buckled. Dominic caught him. A 71-year-old billionaire, a man who hadn't cried in public since his wife's funeral, wept openly in the middle of a ballroom, his hand still reaching toward the tiny photograph. He whispered, "She was alive. The baby was alive." Then, quieter, "Oh God, Colette, she was alive." Imani watched a stranger fall apart over a photo she'd carried her entire life. The photo that had no meaning, no context, no name, no story. Just a woman she'd never met, holding a baby she couldn't be sure was her. Now, for the first time, someone recognized the woman. Someone knew who CW was. In all the life stories Imani had imagined for herself, late at night, alone, tracing the initials with her fingertip, she never imagined this one. Tobias composed himself enough to ask her to step into a private lounge. She agreed, not because she trusted him, because the grief she'd just witnessed was not something a person could fake. Behind a closed door, he told her. The necklace was made for his wife, Colette. Colette was 8 months pregnant when she died, or when he was told she died. The photo inside the locket didn't exist before the crash, which meant Colette survived the impact, delivered the baby. Someone was there. Someone took the photo. And then someone took the baby and vanished. Imani told him her story. No parents, no name. Found as an infant in an abandoned car in rural Illinois. Necklace pinned to her blanket. Case number DCF-IL-04-7738. Foster care, poverty, survival. Tobias did the math. His hands were shaking again. When were you born? I don't have a birthday. They estimated mid-February 2007. Gave me February 15th because the caseworker needed a date. Tobias closed his eyes. The crash was February 14th, Valentine's Day. He'd been taking Colette to a bed and breakfast in Springfield, a weekend away before the baby came. The rain started at dusk. The car hit the guardrail at 7:43 p.m. His daughter may have been born on Valentine's Day. He opened his eyes and looked at Imani. Really looked. Colette's brow, Colette's stubborn chin, Colette's way of holding her head when she was trying not to show fear, and his own deep-set eyes, staring back at him from a face he'd never seen before. "I think you're my daughter." Imani didn't move. She had imagined this sentence every night of her life, some version of it, whispered into the dark of whatever room she was sleeping in, the laundry room table, the too-short bed, the basement with the mold. She had rehearsed this moment so many times that hearing it now felt like a dream, the kind she was always woken from. She said, "I've been told a lot of things by a lot of people. None of them turned out to be true." Among all the black stories of children lost and found, Imani had never believed hers would have a happy chapter. Hope was the cruelest thing the system ever offered, because hope, in her experience, was always taken back. But Tobias Wren wasn't offering hope. He was offering tears. And tears were harder to fake than promises. The question now wasn't whether he believed. He did. The question was whether believing was enough. Because someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure this moment never happened. Someone had erased a baby from the world and told a father she was dead. And that someone was about to find out the secret was no longer buried. Tobias didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse with the lights off, staring at the photograph of Colette on his desk. The same photograph he'd looked at every day for 22 years. But tonight, it looked different. Tonight, the woman in the frame wasn't just his dead wife. She was a mother who had survived long enough to say goodbye to a baby the world told him never existed. By 6 in the morning, he had made 2 calls. The first was to his attorney, Lorraine Kemp. 15 years together. She'd handled his most sensitive legal matters. She listened to the full story without interrupting. The gala, the necklace, the Polaroid, the girl. Then she said, "Before we do anything, DNA. Everything else is emotion. We need science." The second call was to Sable Morrow. Sable was a private investigator. Black woman, late 40s. Former FBI forensic analyst. 12 years tracking missing persons, falsified records, and buried identities. She had a reputation in Chicago for finding people the system forgot. The kind of investigator who didn't stop when the trail went cold. She dug until her hands bled. Tobias gave her 3 things: the story of the crash, the hidden pregnancy, and a description of the necklace with the Polaroid inside. He told her about Imani. Sable listened. Then she said, "So you're asking me to find out if a baby declared dead 22 years ago is alive, walking around Chicago wearing your dead wife's jewelry?" "Tobias, I'm asking you to find my daughter." Sable started where every good investigator starts, with the official record. She pulled the original police report from Sangamon County. The accident report was thorough. Road conditions, vehicle damage, Tobias's injuries, all documented in detail. But the section on Colette was thin. Strangely thin. The coroner's report listed cause of death as internal injuries. Under pregnancy status, the field was blank. Not no, not N/A, blank. Like someone had left it empty on purpose. Under personal effects recovered, no mention of a necklace. A custom-made piece with sapphire and diamond, worth tens of thousands, and it wasn't listed. Sable circled both blanks with red ink. In her experience, what was missing from a report was always more important than what was in it. But Sable wasn't the only one making moves that morning. 12 miles north, in a mansion in Lake Forest, Harlan Wren was pouring himself a whiskey at 7 a.m. His phone had been ringing since midnight. 3 separate sources, a board member's wife, a gala organizer, a family friend, all calling with the same story. Tobias had an emotional breakdown at the gala, over a young black woman. He took her to a private room. He's hired an investigator. Harlan set his glass down carefully. His hand was steady. His mind was not. He had spent 22 years building a wall, brick by brick, lie by lie. And now, because of a girl in a second-hand dress, that wall was cracking. 22 years ago, Harlan was the first to arrive at the hospital after the crash. Tobias was unconscious. Broken pelvis, internal injuries. He wouldn't wake for 3 days. But the paramedics had news. The baby had survived, delivered at the crash scene. A girl, healthy, strong lungs, full term, and black. Harlan looked at the baby and felt something he would never admit to another living person. Disgust. Not at infidelity. There was none. The child was Tobias's. But Colette had been biracial. Her mother was black, a fact Colette kept private because her mother passed away when she was young. Colette rarely spoke about her childhood. She didn't hide her heritage out of shame. She simply had no one left to share it with. But now, that heritage was visible. In the baby's skin, in her dark, curly hair, in the unmistakable truth that a black child would inherit the Wren name, the Wren fortune, and a seat at every table Harlan had spent his life building. He made his decision in the hospital hallway, not in rage, in calculation. He pressured the coroner to leave the pregnancy field blank. He told Tobias the baby was lost in the crash. He paid a rural clinic $185,000 to care for the infant, quietly, off the books, no names. And when the baby was 6 weeks old, he sent his wife Margot to do the final thing. Margot drove to the clinic, took the baby, placed her in a rental car on a dirt road off Route 4, 12 miles from the crash site. She left the baby wrapped in a cashmere blanket monogrammed C.A.W., Colette Adina Wren. And she pinned the necklace back to the blanket. Why the necklace? Maybe a sliver of conscience. Maybe a private confession she hoped no one would ever read. But Margot didn't know about the Polaroid. Neither did Harlan. Colette had hidden the photo inside the locket in her final hours, a dying mother's last move. Smarter than the brother-in-law who thought he'd erased everything. Harlan had built the perfect lie. No records, no witnesses, no trail. A baby who officially never existed, placed into a system designed to forget. And for 22 years, it worked. Now it was falling apart. Because of a girl who refused to sell an $800 necklace when she was 3 days from eviction. Because she kept it. Because she wore it to a gala. Because she opened the locket in front of the one man on earth who would recognize the face inside. Harlan couldn't let that happen. So he went to see his brother. He arrived at Tobias's penthouse that evening, unannounced, a bottle of scotch in hand, a concerned expression on his face. He opened with warmth, asked about Tobias's health, asked about the gala. Then, gently, surgically, he planted the first seed. Tobias, I heard about the girl, the one with the necklace. People are saying she's been telling guests she's your daughter, that she's an heir. A lie. Imani had told no one. But Harlan knew where Tobias was weakest. His fear of being manipulated. It had happened before. Twice in the 2000s, strangers came forward claiming to be Colette's relatives. Both were frauds. Both wanted money. Both left scars on Tobias's ability to trust. Harlan pressed gently. I've seen this before, brother. A young woman from a difficult background. A wealthy, grieving man. An old necklace that could have been bought, found, or stolen. I'm not saying she's lying on purpose. She might believe her own story. But you need to be careful. Tobias listened. He didn't want to believe it. But the doubt was a splinter, and Harlan had pushed it deep. That night, Tobias sat alone in his penthouse, Colette's photo staring at him from the desk. He wanted the girl to be his daughter. He wanted it more than he had wanted anything in 22 years. But wanting something doesn't make it true. And Tobias Wren hadn't built a $4 billion empire by following his heart. The splinter was in. And Harlan was only getting started, because what he had planned next would not just raise doubt, it would manufacture proof. The kind of proof that could turn a daughter into a con artist and bury her for good. 3 days after planting the seed, Harlan Wren made a phone call. Not to a lawyer, not to a friend, to a man named Raymond Voss. Voss was a retired private security consultant, 62, quiet, efficient. He'd done off-the-books work for Harlan for over a decade. Background checks on business rivals, surveillance on employees suspected of leaking information. The kind of work that never appeared in any contract. Harlan gave him a simple instruction. I need you to build a history for the girl. A real one. One that proves she's a fraud. Voss didn't ask questions. He never did. Within 72 hours, he had constructed an entirely new identity for Imani Okafor Wells. Not her real identity, a fake one, designed to destroy her. The first fabrication, the necklace, was stolen. Voss contacted a pawn shop owner on the south side who owed Harlan a business favor. The owner signed a notarized statement claiming Imani had tried to pawn a necklace matching the description in 2023. He said the piece was flagged in a stolen goods database. He said he turned her away. None of it was true. He'd never met Imani. The database flag was inserted retroactively by Voss through a connection in a private insurance firm. The second fabrication, a criminal record. Voss arranged for a falsified police report in a suburban jurisdiction. Overworked clerks, outdated filing systems, the kind of department where a document could be slipped in without anyone noticing for months. The report named Imani Wells as a person of interest in a check fraud investigation from 2022. The case number was fake. The detective listed on the report had retired 2 years ago, but on paper, it looked real. The third fabrication, social media proof. Voss hired a digital specialist to produce screenshots. Imani's supposed social media history, posts about the Wren family, searches for Colette Wren necklace, messages in forums discussing how to target wealthy older men. All fabricated, all time-stamped, all convincing enough to survive a casual glance. The fourth fabrication, the kill shot. Voss contacted a former DCFS caseworker who'd been fired in 2018. Fired for what? Falsifying records. For $15,000, this person produced a supplemental file for case DCF-IL-04-7738. The file claimed that in 2009, Imani's biological mother had been identified as a woman named Shonda Harris, a woman from the West Side who'd abandoned her child and later died. The file included intake notes, a maternal interview summary, a DNA match result. All fake, every word. But assembled together, the stolen necklace flag, the criminal record, the social media trail, the biological mother, it formed a dossier, 43 pages, sourced, documented, professional. The kind of evidence package that would make any reasonable person stop and reconsider. And that was exactly the point. Harlan didn't need to prove Imani was a fraud. He just needed Tobias to doubt she wasn't. He delivered the dossier on a Thursday afternoon. Tobias's corner office, 70th floor. Lake Michigan stretched out behind the windows like a gray sheet. Harlan set the folder on the desk. He didn't rush. He didn't push. He wore the face of a man delivering bad news to someone he loved. Tobias, I know this isn't what you want to hear. I know you wanted her to be Colette's daughter. But look at this. Page by page. The stolen goods flag, the police report, the screenshots, and then the DCFS file. Shonda Harris, biological mother, DNA match, case closed. Harlan's voice was soft, almost gentle, the voice of a man performing kindness. Her real mother was a woman who abandoned her. The necklace was probably stolen or sold years ago. This girl saw an opportunity, a grieving billionaire, a famous dead wife, a missing necklace, and she took it. He paused. Let the silence do the work. She's a con artist, Tobias. She played you. Tobias read the dossier. Every page, every line. His face didn't change. His hands didn't shake. He read it the way he read contracts, looking for the flaw, the inconsistency, the thing that didn't fit. But the dossier was good. Voss was thorough. Every fabrication had a source. Every lie had a document to back it up. And Tobias had been here before. Twice. 2 strangers who claimed to be connected to Colette. 2 frauds who wanted money. Both had been convincing. Both had been lies. Both had left him feeling like a fool. A grieving man too desperate to see the truth. The rational part of his mind, the part that built a $4.2 billion empire, spoke clearly. The evidence is documented. It's detailed. It's sourced. What do you have? A feeling. A necklace. A photograph of your wife holding a baby that could be anyone's baby. Tobias closed the folder. He called Sable Morrow. His voice was flat, dead, like a man reading from a script someone else had written. I was wrong. She's not my daughter. Stop the investigation. Sable. Mr. Wren, with respect, you haven't seen my findings yet. I said stop. Send me your invoice. He hung up. Then he sat in his office, alone, until the sun went down and the lake turned black outside his window. He poured 2 glasses of wine, but for the first time in 22 years, he couldn't bring himself to drink Colette's. The next morning, his assistant, Niles Kavanaugh, sent an email. Polite, professional, final. Mr. Wren appreciates your time at the gala and wishes you well in your studies. Imani read it on her phone. Standing in the hospital laundry room at 4:47 a.m., surrounded by bags of dirty sheets, the fluorescent light buzzing above her head, she read it 3 times. She understood immediately. She'd been dismissed. Again. The same way foster families dismissed her. The same way the system dismissed her. A form letter and a closed door. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence where a person used to be. She put her phone in her pocket. She picked up the next bag of linens. She hauled it to the machine, and she kept working. That night, in her basement apartment, she sat on the bed with the broken frame, the mold on the wall, the ceiling that leaked. She held the necklace in her palm and opened the locket. The Polaroid stared back at her, the woman with auburn hair, the baby she might have been. She whispered to the photograph the way she always did when the world told her she didn't matter. I'm still here. I'm still here. But something was different this time. This wasn't a stranger's rejection. She had watched the man cry over this photograph. She had seen recognition in his eyes, not curiosity, not pity, recognition. That kind of grief was not performance. That kind of grief was bone deep. The man who wept over her mother's photo did not write that email. Someone else did. Someone got to him. Imani walked to the library the next day, used the public computer, searched Wren family, Chicago. She found Tobias. She found Harlan. She found Margot. She read about Harlan's legal career, his corporate connections, his Lake Forest mansion. She couldn't articulate it yet, but she could feel it, the shape of something wrong, the outline of a lie she couldn't quite see. She had no money for lawyers, no connections, no power. $47 and a necklace she would never sell. So she did what she had always done. She went back to work. Laundry at 4, nails at noon, floors at night. She carried the necklace against her heart and she waited. Not passively, not like someone who'd given up. Like someone who had survived 19 years of being forgotten. With fury compressed into patience. With silence sharpened into a blade. Because Imani Okafor-Wells had learned one thing the system never meant to teach her. The people who tried hardest to make you disappear were always the ones with the most to hide. And somewhere in Lake Forest, behind the gates and the hedges and the old money smile, someone was hiding something enormous. The question was what? And the answer was coming, whether Harlan Wren was ready for it or not. 3 weeks passed. 21 nights of Tobias Wren sitting alone in his penthouse, the dossier open on his desk, the bottle beside it. Not wine anymore. Whiskey. The kind of drinking a man does when he's trying to drown something that won't stay under. He had read the dossier 17 times. Every time, the same thought circled back. A detail that didn't fit. Buried in the most convincing part of Harlan's evidence. The DCFS file. The one identifying Shonda Harris as Imani's biological mother. The DNA match was dated 2009, 2 years after Imani entered the system. She would have been 4 years old. Standard DCFS protocol in Illinois required notification. When a biological parent was identified, the caseworker was informed. The guardian was informed. The child's file was updated. It was law. But Imani told Tobias she was never notified. No caseworker mentioned it. No guardian. No one ever came for her. If the match was real, someone would have told her. Unless it was never entered into the real system. Unless it was fabricated after the fact and planted in a paper file Imani would never see. It was 2 a.m. when Tobias picked up the phone. Sable Morrow answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. "I was wondering when you'd call back. The dossier my brother gave me. Can you verify it?" "I already started." Tobias paused. "I told you to stop." "You did. I slowed down. I didn't stop." "Why?" "Because I spent 12 years at the FBI watching children fall through cracks built by people with power. When I see a crack, I don't walk away. I look through it." Over the next 2 weeks, Sable took Harlan's dossier apart, layer by layer, lie by lie. She started with the stolen necklace flag. She contacted the insurance database company. The flag had been inserted 3 weeks earlier, not in 2023 when Imani supposedly tried to pawn it, but after the gala. The IP address traced back to a private security firm that had done corporate work for Harlan Wren for over a decade. Then she visited the pawnshop owner, the man who'd signed the notarized statement. Sable sat across from him and said nothing for a full minute, just looked at him. He broke in 10. Paid $5,000 to sign. Never met Imani, never seen the necklace. Next, the criminal record. The police report naming Imani Wells in check fraud. Sable called the department's records division. The report number was out of sequence, inserted between 2 legitimate filings months apart. Uploaded remotely using credentials belonging to a retired detective. Sable traced him. He had done work for Raymond Voss. Then, the social media screenshots. Sable sent them to a digital forensic analyst. Results came back in 48 hours. The metadata was wrong. Screenshots dated 2024, but the font matched a social media interface that changed in a March 2025 platform update. The screenshots used the old font on a new date. Common mistake in fabricated evidence. And finally, the DCFS file. Shonda Harris, the fake mother. Sable tracked down Imani's actual caseworker, Francine Del Vecchio, retired in Bloomington, Illinois. She remembered case DCF-IL-04-7738 because it was unusual. Francine confirmed without hesitation, no DNA match had ever been performed during Imani's time in the system. No biological parent identified. The supplemental file naming Shonda Harris did not exist in the state's central database, only in the paper copy Harlan provided. And the caseworker who allegedly wrote the file? Fired from DCFS in 2018 for falsifying records. Sable compiled everything into a counter dossier, every fabrication identified, every payment traced, every source exposed. She added her original findings, the altered coroner's report with its blank pregnancy field, the $185,000 paid to a rural clinic, the caseworker's notes about a lawyer from Harlan's firm ensuring the baby was placed with no identifying information retained. She presented it to Tobias, laid the counter dossier next to Harlan's dossier on the desk. 2 stacks of paper, one built on lies, one built on truth. She was not gentle. "Your brother didn't just hide your daughter 22 years ago. He tried to destroy her a second time. Right here, using your grief as a weapon. Every document he gave you is fabricated. Every single one. The trail leads directly to him." Tobias stared at the 2 stacks. The lie and the truth. Identical in weight. Opposite in everything else. But he needed more than Sable's findings. Not legal certainty. Personal certainty. The kind that lives in the chest, not the courtroom. He didn't tell Sable. Didn't tell Lorraine. Didn't tell anyone. He acted alone. He contacted Imani through the scholarship coordinator, asked if she'd meet to discuss her studies. Imani was wary. The last time she'd opened herself to hope, she'd received a form letter dismissal. But she agreed, because never knowing was worse than being hurt again. They met at a coffee shop in Hyde Park. Tobias bought her coffee and a sandwich. She ate slowly, carefully, trying not to look hungry. He noticed. He said nothing. But something tightened in his chest. Not doubt, recognition. The way she wrapped both hands around the cup, the way she tilted her head when thinking, the way she looked down before answering a hard question, checking with herself first. Colette. Every gesture, every tilt, every pause. So precisely Colette that no dossier on earth could manufacture it. Among all the touching stories Tobias had heard, stories of families reunited after decades, he had never believed one could be his. But sitting across from this girl, watching her hold a coffee cup exactly the way his dead wife used to, he felt something shift. Not hope. Deeper than hope. Recognition dressed as a stranger. They talked for 40 minutes. When Imani stood to leave, a few strands of hair caught on the back of the chair. Curly, dark, left behind without her knowing. Tobias waited until she was gone, picked the strands from the fabric, sealed them in a plastic bag. His hands were shaking. He drove to Genver Diagnostics, a private forensic DNA laboratory, strict chain of custody protocols. He provided 3 samples, Imani's hair, his own saliva, swabbed on site, and Colette's preserved lock of hair, kept in his vault for 22 years. The technician said, "Triple kinship analysis, 7 to 10 business days." Tobias nodded. "I have waited 22 years. I can wait 10 more days." He walked into the October air. 10 days. 10 days until science answered the question his heart had answered the moment he saw the Polaroid. But 10 days was a long time, and Harlan Wren was not a man who waited for other people to make the next move. 10 days later, a Tuesday morning, October light coming through the windows of Genver Diagnostics like it didn't know what was about to happen inside. Tobias Wren arrived alone. No attorney, no investigator, no brother. Just a 71-year-old man in a coat he'd forgotten to button, walking through the front door of a DNA laboratory the way a defendant walks into a courtroom, knowing that whatever comes next will change everything. The laboratory director, Dr. Priya Iyer, met him in the lobby. She held a sealed envelope. She said, "Mr. Wren, these results are definitive. Would you like me to explain them, or would you prefer to read them privately?" Privately. She handed him the envelope and left the room. Tobias sat down in the waiting area. 2 plastic chairs, a water cooler humming in the corner, a room designed for ordinary moments. This was not an ordinary moment. He opened the envelope. Result 1. Maternal kinship. Mitochondrial DNA comparison between Colette Wren and Imani Okafor Wells. Match confirmed. Probability of maternity, 99.97%. Result 2. Paternal kinship. Autosomal DNA comparison across 22 STR loci between Tobias Wren and Imani Okafor Wells. Combined paternity index, 458,000 to 1. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Tobias read the numbers, read them again. Then he pressed the paper against his chest, closed his eyes, and cried. Not the shocked, public tears of the gala. These were different. Quiet. Private. The tears of a man sitting alone in a plastic chair, holding a piece of paper that told him the greatest loss of his life had been a lie. His daughter was alive. She had always been alive. Working 3 jobs, eating once a day, sleeping in a basement with mold on the walls, carrying her mother's necklace against her heart like a prayer that no one was answering. She was not a con artist, not a stranger, not a fraud. She was his child, Colette's child. Born on Valentine's Day in a wrecked car on a rain-soaked highway. Delivered by paramedics. Photographed by a nurse who handed a Polaroid to a dying mother. A mother who trimmed the photo, placed it inside a locket, and pinned it to a blanket, so that one day someone would find her daughter. And 22 years later, someone did. That evening, Tobias drove to Lake Forest. Gold light through the October trees. leaves falling on a lawn that cost more to maintain than Imani earned in a year. He brought Sable Morrow. He brought the DNA results. He brought the counter dossier. Every fabrication documented, every lie exposed. Harlan opened the door and knew immediately. His face became something Tobias had never seen before. Not anger, not fear, but the expression of a man watching a structure he'd spent decades building begin to collapse from the foundation up. Margot appeared behind him. She was holding a glass of wine. She set it down when she saw the folder in Tobias's hand. Tobias walked past them both, into the dining room. He laid the evidence on the table, the way a prosecutor lays evidence before a jury. The DNA results, the counter dossier, the exposed fabrications, the coroner's report, the clinic payments, Raymond Voss's trail. Then he spoke. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You took my wife's child, our child, mine and Colette's, and you threw her away. You hid a living baby inside a system designed to lose people. You told me my child died, and I believed you because you're my brother. I grieved for 22 years for a daughter who was alive the entire time, eating alone in laundry rooms, wearing shoes that didn't fit, keeping her belongings in one bag, always packed, because no family ever asked her to stay. She had nothing. Nothing except a necklace and a photograph of her mother. And you couldn't even take that from her, because Colette was smarter than you. She hid the photo inside the locket. She knew someone would try to erase her baby, and she left proof. Then, when the proof surfaced, when you realized the lie was falling apart, you didn't confess. You built a second lie. You manufactured a criminal record for a 19-year-old girl who has $47 in her bank account. You invented a dead mother to replace her real one. You tried to turn my daughter into a con artist. You tried to erase her twice. The room was silent, the kind of silence that has weight. Harlan spoke. His voice was controlled, precise. The voice of a lawyer making a closing argument he knew he'd already lost. That child's skin color would have destroyed this family's reputation. The boards, the investors, the press. A black heir to the Wren name. Tobias cut him off. Finish that sentence. I want you to hear yourself say it. Harlan stopped. Margot spoke next, less composed, her voice shaking. We couldn't let the world know. We did what families do. We managed the situation. The word managed hung in the air, like a confession dressed as an excuse. Sable Morrow, who had been standing by the doorway in silence, spoke for the first time. For the record, Mr. Harlan Wren, I have documented evidence of child abandonment, obstruction of justice, fraud upon the court, conspiracy to falsify medical and government records, and fabrication of evidence. This conversation is being recorded with Mr. Tobias Wren's consent under Illinois one-party consent law. Copies of all materials have been provided to both the Sangamon County and Cook County state's attorneys. Harlan turned to his brother. The mask was gone now. Underneath it, not remorse, fear. You wouldn't do this to family. Tobias looked at him for a long time. Then he said, You did it to mine. Over the next 3 months, the machinery of justice turned. Slowly, precisely. The way it always does when there's enough evidence and enough money to make it move. Tobias's legal team filed civil claims against Harlan and Margot. Fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, fabrication of evidence. Criminal referrals went to 2 jurisdictions. Raymond Voss cooperated with prosecutors. He provided a full account of his 22-year relationship with Harlan, including the fact that Harlan had monitored Imani's foster placements from a distance, year after year. He knew where she was. He knew she was alone. He did nothing except make sure she stayed forgotten. The former DCFS caseworker who fabricated the Shonda Harris file was charged with fraud and tampering with government records. The court ruled in Tobias's favor on all civil claims. Criminal proceedings were initiated. Harlan and Margot's assets were frozen. DCFS opened an internal review of case DCF-IL-04-7738, resulting in new policy: mandatory cross-referencing of foundling cases with accident and missing persons reports. Among all the black stories of injustice and silence, this one would not end quietly. The system that had been used as a weapon against a child was now turning its weight toward the people who built that weapon. But justice was only half the story. The law could punish Harlan. It could freeze his accounts and file his crimes into the public record. But the law could not give a father and daughter back 22 lost years. It could not undo the laundry rooms and the packed bags and the doors that closed without goodbyes. That part, the human part, was still unwritten. The phone rang at 7:14 p.m. Imani was sitting on the edge of her bed in the basement apartment, mold on the walls, a ceiling that leaked, the necklace in her hand. She almost didn't answer, but she did. Tobias's voice came through, thick with emotion but steady. The voice of a man who had rehearsed every word and was still afraid of saying them wrong. Imani, I owe you an apology. Someone I trusted lied to me about you, about everything. I believed them, and I walked away. I will never forgive myself for that. Silence on the line. She didn't hang up. She didn't speak. She just held the phone and waited, the way she had waited her entire life. The DNA test came back. You are my daughter, mine and Colette's. You are the baby in that photograph, the one your mother put inside the necklace. She named you with that pendant, her moon and star. You've been carrying your mother's last words around your neck for 19 years. His voice broke. And I am so sorry it took me 22 years to find you. Imani sat on the bed with the broken frame, in the basement with the mold and the leaking ceiling, holding the phone against her ear. And she did the thing she had taught herself never to do. She cried. Not the silent kind, not the swallowed kind. The crying of a child who learned early that tears don't change anything. This was different, real, loud, the kind that comes from somewhere so deep it doesn't have a name. From 19 years of eating alone in laundry rooms, keeping her bag packed, watching foster mothers close the door without saying goodbye, wondering every single night, did anyone ever want me? Someone did. Someone always did. A mother who used her last breath to pin a locket to a blanket. A father who poured 2 glasses of wine every evening for 22 years. They visited Colette's grave together, a quiet cemetery outside Chicago. Bare trees, silver sky. Imani knelt and placed her hand on the headstone. She said, "I'm here, Mom. I made it." Tobias stood behind her. When she rose, she turned to him. "Thank you for finding me." He said, "Thank you for surviving long enough to be found." Tobias offered her the penthouse. She refused. She moved into a small, clean apartment in Hyde Park, funded by the Colette Wren Memorial Foundation, which now provided housing for young people aging out of foster care. She insisted on paying reduced rent. "I don't need a mansion. I need a door that locks and a ceiling that doesn't leak." She enrolled at the University of Chicago's pre-law program. Full scholarship, earned on her own merits. She kept her name, Imani Okafor Wells. Odera Okafor gave her a home when the world didn't. That name would stay. But in the legal filings, her birth identity was restored. Daughter of Colette Adina Wren and Tobias Wren. The monogram on the cashmere blanket, CAW, finally made sense. They built their bond slowly. Sunday breakfasts, phone calls on weekday evenings. Tobias didn't pretend the lost years hadn't happened. Imani didn't pretend she wasn't angry. But she let him in. The first time she called him Dad, she did it by accident, mid-sentence, casually, the way family members do. She stopped, startled by her own voice. Tobias said nothing. He just smiled. It was enough. 6 months later, Imani arrived for Sunday breakfast, carrying something small. She opened the locket and showed him what she'd done. On the other side, the side that had been empty for 19 years, she had placed a new photograph, her and Tobias, taken on her enrollment day at the university, both smiling, standing together. The locket now held two photos, Colette holding newborn Imani on one side, and Imani, 19 years later, standing beside her father on the other. The moon and the star, together again.